All right, this week we read the Federalist Papers. I didn't have any difficulties with the reading, but I did want to list some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses that I saw in the documents that we read. Obviously, we can look at our current state and realize that the Constitution was a great document, and then the idea of a strong, united government is just so important. I think we have a lot of strengths from the Federalist Papers because of what we've seen work since the Constitution was put into order. And so I just want to list a couple of those strengths, and we'll talk about some of the weaknesses I saw as well. So the united government controlling the military is such an important asset. And we see the fact that if something's happening, our country needed to be able to defend its borders and to have unlimited resources or unlimited access to be able to defend our borders is so important, and not to be interrupted by the state. So the state couldn't say, well, you can't have my militia. So this is important. And we saw this in Smith's book whenever he talked about the wealth of nations. And so in that book, we see the protection being what allows the cities to grow and what allows the countryside to grow once the cities have grown. And so I think this is the same idea here in the United States. Our country could do well, even amongst the states and trading with one another and those kind of things, as long as they're protected. I think the next big strength I see is that by having a united government, you have a less chance of inner turmoil inside the country itself, and especially in the states. If you had one state over here and somebody rises to power and it tries to turn into a monarch, and then you have, that causes problem with this other state that's over here beside it, and all of a sudden you have all these insurrections and different things that could happen. And so by having a united government, it stops that. It puts an end to it. And so I think that was important for uniting the states together. The next thing is the idea of checks and balances in government was huge, and the fact that no other government, even the ones that's mentioned in the Federalist paper here, is maybe an example of why you don't need a united government. You can see that the checks and balances are so important, and it's what keeps not only govern the people but governs the government itself. And I think we've crossed that line several times since this document was founded. But throughout the years and throughout history, it has made impact on what our country's allowed to do. It doesn't allow us to have a tyrant or a king, as we just seen the No Kings protest thing. But our Constitution protects the people from having someone that tramples their liberties in a way that they can come in and just tell them what to do, and that's what they have to do. So there is that checks and balance system. Another big one that I seen was the ability to amend the Constitution. I think that's huge because look, as we grow, as we get more, especially technology now and different things, amendments are important to be able to go back and look at the Constitution, maybe change a few things. And then lastly, I like the fact that they acknowledge that this document is limited to the humanities' ability to put it into words. And so it is an imperfect document, but it was the best imperfect document we had at the time. And so I thought that was pretty neat. Now let's look at some of the weaknesses. As I was reading this, I see a few arguments that I would have, and obviously one of them I think everybody does, seeing how we have the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. But the idea that the Bill of Rights should not have been allowed to be put in the Constitution, the Constitution has enough liberty for us, is a very big problem. The Bill of Rights was important in to define what we can do and what we can say and what we can, the things that freedoms that we do have. It was so important to give us a list of what we can or can't do. In the world we live in today, had we not had the Bill of Rights, it would have been easy for someone in the upper government to come in and say, you know what, this state, this person, you have no rights. We're going to do this. You can't speak. I'm putting you in prison. Those kind of things. So the idea of not having the Bill of Rights in it was actually was a bad idea. So I'm glad that that's something that they didn't listen to, and they looked at it and they allowed for the amendment. Probably the last thing that I would like to say is the lack of express liberties of the states under the rule of the centralized government, and I think that's big. Because we don't define the actual freedoms that each state has, or not want to say each state, well, individual states have, and we allow the government to kind of have this overarching weight over the states. And so we've seen things getting taken away from the states that ought to stay in the states' hands. I go into a whole lot of detail about that. I'll have a 20-minute video, but I wanted to at least point that out. I think they needed to express some certain freedoms amongst the states in order for them to keep that autonomy to do those things which were necessary for their people. Okay, a couple of questions. Even with the checks and balances, do you feel, looking at our government now, that we have some branches that are more powerful than others? And one reason I ask this question is I look at the judicial system and what they're able to overrule or what they're able to put a stop to. So just want to see if you think there's one branch that maybe has more power than the other now that we've gone through this thing for a few years. All right. Also, can you see any good that would have come from a rejection of the Bill of Rights from our Constitution, especially after seeing the protest in our country today? And so when you look at all these different things and this freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and all these different things, can you see a place where maybe the Bill of Rights causes to take a different turn than what the intentions was? Thank you so much, and have a great day.